Hello there, this is James S. Crofty, James1978, with a video exploring and hopefully answering a question which has haunted me for as long as I've been on YouTube, specifically why it is that so many dancers, musicians, vocalists and other artists and performers actively apologise for what they create. Always insisting that no, they're not talented and their work is rubbish, no matter how many people praise them or how sincerely they may do so, because now, at long last, thanks in part to the School of Life, I finally formulated 4 answers which altogether, I believe, explain the entire phenomenon, at least in a general sense. Of course, this video is all supposition, especially bearing in mind that everyone is unique and individuals may have their own personal reasons, so if you wish to propose any additional or alternative answers, then please feel free to do so down in the comment section. But in the meantime, the first answer which I propose to the question of why artists and performers are always their own harshest critics, as indicated by the School of Life's recent video linked down in the underbar, is the imposter syndrome, the irrational belief that we can never be as successful or as good in any sense of the term as we believe others to be, because while we are each intimately and inescapably aware of our own flaws and limitations, fears and anxieties, the corners that we cut, and the quote-unquote amateur techniques that we use to cobble together something which we hope others will tolerate because it's nothing like what we envisioned, all we ever see of other people and their work is the finished creation and the edited highlights of their lives and their personalities which they allow others to see. This, in fact, is the basis of the old saying that we should never meet our heroes, because the more time that we spend in their company, the more that we will inevitably realise that they are flawed and imperfect human beings, no different from ourselves, people who also, at least in their own minds, cut corners and use quote-unquote amateur techniques to create something which they hope is tolerable because it's only a pale imitation of what they originally envisioned, while living in envy of their own heroes who they believe can or could, depending on whether they're alive or not, walk on water. Because in the end, the nature of human consciousness and communication, which I've explained in previous videos, means that the grass will always be greener, and we will always believe that others are more skilled, talented, dedicated, and therefore deserving of success than we are. On the flip side of this coin as well, because it's built upon the fear of how other people perceive us rather than how we perceive others, is the second answer, based upon the reality that society as a whole in the 20th and 21st centuries have rejected and continue to condemn art as frivolous, trivial, and a meaningless waste of time. After all, if it's not earning you money and prestige at the moment, or like studying for a degree in law or a STEM field, perceived as being a necessary stepping stone towards earning more money and prestige in the future, then as far as most people are concerned, you may as well be uploading a cat video. Because what's the difference between one nice thing that we enjoy and another, bearing in mind that the only thing that matters is whether or not we are prepared to personally pay money for it. Meaning that far from taking pride in the hard work and passion that they poured into creating something of profound beauty, arrogance and pretentiousness, which they fear will lead to a backlash against them from their audience for wasting time on trivial and meaningless art, music and dance, too many YouTube musicians, dancers and vocalists in particular apparently struggle to convince themselves that they're only creating another distraction for others on our inevitable journey towards the grave, and thus feel compelled to apologise for anything and everything that they fear will detract from the audience's enjoyment of the product which they created solely for other people's entertainment, because the sad reality is that it's often easier to downplay and minimise our own work and passion than it is to endure the pain of having it criticised, mocked, ridiculed, dismissed, or even condemned as a meaningless waste of time created by an arrogant and pretentious arsehole. A reality which is epitomised by the third answer to this question, the fact that no matter what they do or don't do in their videos, far too many artists and performers on YouTube receive a tidal wave of hate comments, harassment, insults, abuse, and even direct threats against themselves and their loved ones, particularly if they're female, are perceived as being female or present as female in their videos, regardless of their true gender. And instead of fighting back or simply telling the haters to go and fuck themselves, often have no choice but to apologise and take responsibility for everything for fear of bringing an even more violent and hateful backlash down upon themselves and anyone around them at the time. Indeed, as a straight, white and cisgendered man, I can never imagine what it must be like to pour my heart and soul into creating something of beauty and sharing it with the world through YouTube, only to receive comments calling me a talentless, attention-seeking bitch and a whore, telling me to get my tits out, or saying that I'm really sexy and asking if I want to fuck and or marry them, but then seeing the men and boys who posted these supposedly complimentary comments turn equally nasty and abusive when I say no, no matter how gently I may let them down, and I especially can't imagine what it's like to have to endure all of this with a polite, demure and respectful smile, never doing or saying anything that might lead to me being condemned as a bitch or worse for daring to put my demands to be respected as a human being and my right to defend myself against abuse, intimidation and harassment before men's delicate and precious feelings and entitlements. Which finally brings me on to the fourth answer to this question, the fact that whether it's intentional or not, girls across the world are still raised from birth to be polite, demure and respectful, and above all, to support and empower men and boys at every possible turn, or at the very least, to never do anything to show us up, emasculate us, or make us feel inferior, especially not by daring to be better at anything than we are. That after 10 or 15 years of this indoctrination, it becomes a reflex that most girls and women don't even realise they're doing, but which, even when they do notice it, feel compelled to do anyway, not only because of the fear of being judged by society for not being sufficiently feminine, i.e. regardless of how they may dress or what have you, not being weak, accommodating and submissive enough to the men who are their superiors by default, solely because of their biological sex and gender identity and expression, but because of the very real threat which far too many women and girls face in their everyday lives, that the men and boys in question will shun them, leave them, turn against them, humiliate them, perhaps by leaking nudes on the internet, sexually assault or rape them in order to re-establish their dominance, or in the most extreme cases, turn violent and sometimes even physically beat them to death in order to maintain their masculinity in the face of the humiliation of finding out that a mere woman or girl is more qualified, talented, intelligent, successful, or makes more money than they do. Which, as I say, sticking specifically to the issue of this video, all blends together to create the situation that makes me want to weep, in which incredibly talented dancers, musicians, vocalists, and other artists and performers, particularly if they're female, write video descriptions declaring how terrible they are, apologising for everything, and insisting that other artists and performers are far superior to them.